Greetings. This is part two of a reading guide, I guess you could call this, video reading guide of Abigail Favale's book, The Genesis of Gender. In the first video, we talked about just reading this book in general, or reading books like this in general, and then we talked about the cover, title page, or the copyright page, contents, index, all that kind of stuff. One thing that I missed is the back cover, which tells you about Abigail Favale herself. And her little bio here is good. And you can also see the other books that she's published. No, I'm sorry, that's other people. You can go on her website and see what else she's published. Although it does have other important books from Ignatius Press that are a little bit like this. And those might be worth it. If you really like this book, you might want to go and look at that. Okay, so, but this is on chapter 1. There's just a few things. I don't want to give away the chapter, but I did want to kind of provide maybe a little bit of help in reading it. And so I just have a few notes here about what she's talking about. This is biographical. She tells her story of how she goes from being a radical feminist to being a Christian feminist. So that's the first thing I want to talk about. Is I think she would identify as a feminist. She certainly does not run from the term, and in fact, she in some ways recommends feminism. And when you first read this, I think some viewers might instantly go, "Oh no, she's feminist. This is not." But don't do that. Give her a chance. Think very carefully. Think, like, really ponder what she means by feminism. She talks a little bit about it early on. I think she talks about it kind of through her book. So just give her a chance and follow it through. I think that her brand of feminism would be pretty hard to argue with, I think. She doesn't actually say a lot about feminism. This is not a book about feminism, but just teasing out what she might mean by the term. I think in my opinion, it sounds pretty solid. And so, evangelical feminist is where she starts off as, and then became a postmodern feminist, and then a heretical feminist. Okay, so this is how she became a Christian, and so she gives her conversion story. So she starts off as an evangelical Christian, growing up in a conservative church, and very familiar with the evangelical world, which is also why I think this is very useful, because she understands both, like, atheism, agnosticism. She understands evangelicalism, which is kind of my world more, and then she talks about a little bit about Catholicism, but mainly her conversion to Catholicism. So here on page 29, she says, "There's ample room and a great need for an authentically Christian feminism. This is the new feminism John Paul II called for. A feminism that reclaims women's dignity and does not simply replicate masculine modes of domination." All right. So she says, I'm a heretic one way or another. She's a heretic from academic, kind of standard feminism. But, be aware that she is a feminist. So it doesn't bother me at all. And I think if you read it, you'll kind of like it too. So, okay, maybe. All right. So that's the first thing I wanted to mention. The second thing that she also lays out two paradigms. Okay, two paradigms. Paradigms. If you're not familiar with that term, a paradigm is 20 cents. A paradigm is actually just sort of like a frame for how you understand the world, right? So a paradigm is, well, like an example of a paradigm is creationism is a paradigm versus evolutionism is a paradigm. If you're a creationist, you look at the world through the lens of there's a creator, God, who rules the world. And so as I make my way through the world, whatever I'm looking at is sort of conditioned by this frame that says, hey, whatever you see is within God's purview, is within God's authority, and God did everything. Okay, so that's a paradigm. It's a way of understanding something, a way of explaining something. as opposed to the evolutionary paradigm, which in its classic sense, I know that there are people who say, oh, I'm a Christian evolutionist, but putting them aside, evolutionism is, kind of lock, stock, and barrel and more atheist. And so, predominantly. And so, evolution becomes like a secular paradigm. When I look at the world, I don't see God. I'm not the lens I'm looking through. A paradigm is like a lens, right? It's like a lens. It's like glasses that you're looking through. And mine usually are clear, but recently I got glasses and I don't have them here. Recently, like last year or something like that, which is recently for me, I buy glasses like once every 5 years. So my most recent glasses are like a year old or something like that, maybe 2 years old. Anyway, and so they said, hey, you want this kind of film on it or this kind of thing on it that helps. I can't remember what it was supposed to do, but it was supposed to do something. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds good. Do that. And so they put this thing. I noticed it was a little bit tinted. All right. So everything that I look at is affected now by not only the lens itself, like how it's curved and how it clears things up, but it's also through kind of a color. Right. So a paradigm is just like that. And so the evolutionary paradigm is like, okay, when I see the world, what do I see? I don't see God. I don't see his handiwork. I don't trust that he's in charge. I don't think about him being in charge. I see just something that just in some way that I can't explain, but somehow this all just happened by chance and here it is and there's nobody in charge and there's no real meaning. It's just kind of like it's just there. So what's my job? Well, just to do whatever with this random world that I'm presented with, right? So that's another paradigm. So what she's going to talk about is two paradigms, all right? A paradigm of gender, which is based on kind of radical secular academic thought, right? So that's the so she's going to talk about two gender paradigms. One is according to that, and one is according to the Bible, all right? And that's kind of her theme. The next chapter is going to talk about where it's going to talk about kind of maybe one way of understanding the secular atheist paradigm of gender and versus the Christian biblical Genesis paradigm for gender, right? But in chapter 1, she just kind of lays out what is a paradigm and what am I going to be trying to do here. All right. Now, there's some words in here that you may not be familiar with. Look them up. It's not really, I don't think there's anything too awfully difficult in this chapter besides the notion of paradigm. But just put that. I think more than anything, I want you to not be, turned off by her feminism, and I don't want you to be turned off or confused by the word paradigm. All it is what she's going to do in this book is lay out, here's the academic paradigm that sort of rules academia, colleges, universities, and increasingly our world, right? Where did all this gender stuff come from? It didn't come out of nowhere. It came from colleges and universities, which is why I just like plead with people, think before you go off to college and universities, because this is all over. This is like all over colleges and universities today. A gender paradigm that is leading us, I think, down just very unfortunate roads. So she's going to talk about that, and then she's going to talk about what she thinks is a Christian paradigm or a Christian theory. Paradigm is in certain ways theoretical. It's kind of a theory. A paradigm is kind of a theory, like how things are. Those words are not totally synonymous, but paradigm can be like a theory. All right, so she's going to talk about the Christian gender paradigm. So that is chapter 1. I would love if this was more of a conversation and you could actually post questions. That would be great. I'd love to answer your questions as best I can. Or talk to me. Emails, I just don't like emails, and I don't always answer them. But if you know me and you see me, I love to talk to you in person about this stuff because I think it's great. So anyway, all right, thank you very much. Actually, you know what? If you have a question, why don't you do email me and I might answer it in the next video or something like that, or in a future video. We'll see. I don't know. Anyway, hopefully you enjoy it. That is chapter 1. God bless your reading and thinking and praying and considering. Okay, don't leave yet because I just thought of a few other things. I just watched that first part and I realized, oh, I should have explained this. Oh, I should have done that. So here's a little bit extra. You get a little extra on this video. First thing, postmodernism. She mentions postmodernism. We should probably define that? By going back to a few centuries to like the medieval period. In the medieval period, people just sort of expected everything to stay the same. It's really hard for us to imagine that, right? Because we live in a world where we just expect change all the time. Well, in the medieval period, nobody expected change. Like, nothing ever really changed. Well, there were changes, but you weren't aware of it. Okay, and so people didn't really think of it. They were very few and far between and very gradual. So people didn't really think about there being massive changes like we do today. All right, so in the medieval period, you just kind of expected nothing would really be different by the time you died, and even between generations. Would my life be better than my parents? We often talk about that. The American dream that my kids will live a better life than I do. No. They're going to live pretty much the same life that I did, pretty much the same life that my parents did, my grandparents, my great-grandparents. Nothing ever really changes. Well, around about the 1400s, 1500s, 1600s, into the 1700s is kind of what historians often call early modernity. All right, so modernity is kind of the next phase. All right, and that is in history, and that is this sense that actually things can change. We can actually think really hard, work really hard, study really hard, communicate, do great. We can invent, and then things will start changing, and they won't just change. They will change for the better. Like if we really use our brain, we can actually make progress. We can make progress. That's modernity. Things will change, and they will get better, because they said if we usually use our brain, if we really use our brain, then we can start solving problems. And there's this good world out there, this really good, capital G good. And if you're really careful and really think hard, we can move closer and closer and closer to that good. We are stuck in misunderstanding and ignorance and lies. But if we really study, if we really apply ourselves, we can start discerning truth from lie. We can start conquering ignorance. We can learn, and we can move towards capital T truth. So modernity says there is good and there is truth, and we can change, not just random change, but we can actually change towards the good and the true. Okay? Now, post-modernity, post meaning after, modernity meaning modernity, what I just explained. Post-modernity is like the theory, the idea that comes after modernity. Okay, so modernity is the idea that we can change and make progress. Post-modernity is the idea that we will change. Okay, post-modernity says, yes, we will change, but we're not making progress. And the reason we're not making progress is because there's no good, capital G good, that we should be progressing to. To progress means that if I progress, I become better than I am now. Well, better means that there's a value judgment. And under postmodernism, there's no value judgments. Like there's no such thing as, oh, this is better than that. Because there's no capital G good. And there's no capital T truth. So we can't say, oh, we're overcoming ignorance and learning more. No, not really. Because we can't really tell what's true anyway. So we're changing, but we're not changing towards the good and the true. We're not progressing. We're just kind of here. Okay, so what that means is that postmodernity is kind of the philosophy that, you know what, we just kind of create stuff. Because there's no capital G good, capital T truth that's like out there that sort of we're trying to head towards. It just means that there is no meaning. There's no value. We just sort of make stuff up. Okay, so a postmodern theory of gender is what reigns out there, right? Postmodernity is like what is out there all over the place. Okay, it governs our world. It governs academia, and it's just this idea that just says, you know, like gender. There's no such thing as male and female. We just kind of make that up, right? There's no such thing as moral sexuality and immoral sexuality, good sexuality and bad sexuality. It's just whatever we make of it. Just, you know, whatever. Just make up your own rules. Make up your own reality. Just do whatever, right? I mean, hopefully this like, oh yeah, okay, that's a postmodern world we're living in, right? Okay, so that's postmodernity. The second thing I wanted to talk about is taking notes in this book. I hope you take notes, or at least mark up your book, take notes in the margin, underline things, highlight things, whatever you do to keep track of things. I think if you take notes, what I would recommend is keeping 2 columns. All right, 1 column for the secular postmodern paradigm of gender, and 1 for the biblical paradigm of gender. Remember how I said earlier that she's really laying out for you 2 paradigms. which is about 40 cents. Okay, so she's she's laying out the so as you're going through and she's describing things, say, okay, so that's kind of a secular paradigm, and now she's switching to the biblical paradigm, because what you want to do is you want to finish the book and say, I see, here's the secular kind of atheist paradigm that kind of governs the world out there, and here's the biblical one to compare it to, and I can see how they compare. All right, that's really the value of this book, is you can compare what's out there right now, kind of reigning out there, and what the Bible says is a better way. And I think taking notes in 2 columns will help you to do that. The last thing is masculine modes of domination. I read this, and I realized when I was watching the video, I thought, I should explain that. This is the new feminism John Paul II called for, a feminism that reclaims women's dignity and does not simply replicate masculine modes of domination. Okay, what does that mean? I think it'd be easiest to start at the end and work our way backwards. Domination. What is domination? It means somebody is over somebody else, somebody is ruling somebody else, somebody is dominating somebody else. We understand that. Modes. Modes means like forms, right? Masculine, referring to male. So masculine modes of domination. Male, manly ways of dominating people. Okay, so the reason she mentions this is because if you think about it, the feminism that is out there has a lot to do with making women like men, right? And oftentimes trying to achieve the masculine, manly modes, forms of domination. So, hey, there's men go out and they fight wars and go out and kill people and conquer people. Well, how come women can't go out there and kill people and conquer people, right? Hey, men are like CEOs of companies. Well, how come women can't be CEOs of companies? We can dominate people. I don't think she's saying masculine modes of domination are always bad. I don't know. Obviously some people have to be an authority and that sort of thing. And she's not necessarily saying that women shouldn't be CEOs either. But basically what she's saying is, I think what she's saying, and I think the book would confirm this, is that what she's saying is, feminism out there, the worldly feminism, postmodern feminism, interestingly, they're always just trying to be like men. And or even like if you look at, I haven't seen these movies, but like Wonder Woman, and there's some other movies where, like, it used to be Superman, Batman, these male figures that are out there throwing people around and establishing justice. And now we have a whole bunch of women doing the same thing, right? And I'm not saying all that stuff is bad. I'm just saying that I think what she's pointing out is basically feminism is replicating or copying or moving towards masculine modes of domination. So what she says is she wants a feminism that reclaims women's dignity, not as postmoderns do by saying, hey, women can have more dignity if they become more like men. Rather, I think what she's saying is, hey, we can reclaim women's dignity without just becoming like men, right? By maintaining gender differences. And there's nothing wrong with those gender differences, right? Male, female, we're different. So we can have a feminism that enhances female dignity without just saying, and they need to be like men. Okay, so that's what I think she means there in that sentence. Hopefully that makes sense to you, and thank you for watching this. God bless you in your reading and pondering.